Hello guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be previewing the big round 2 Battle of Alberta matchup between the Calgary Flames and the Edmonton Oilers. Now we as hockey fans have been treated to some great matchups so far, but nothing is going to touch the intensity of this upcoming Battle of Alberta. And we have not seen these two teams match up in the playoffs since 1991 in the first round. 31 years later, the intensity is going to be high once again. But when it comes to this Oilers and Flames matchup, who will actually win this series? What do you need to know? And which team will advance on to the Western Conference Final? Watch till the end for all my predictions and the full preview, and make sure you hit that subscribe button to the Sportsnet YouTube channel for the best sports coverage around. And without further ado, let's get into the preview of this massive Battle of Alberta. Now, the first thing I want to talk about for both Edmonton and Calgary is the road they got to get to the second round. Both of these teams face teams that probably shouldn't have pushed them on to 7 games. Edmonton definitely has the rest factor here better than Calgary, because even though they went to 7 games, they did get an extra day off, and they didn't go to overtime like the Flames did. But both of these teams were pushed to 7 games and had great goaltenders on the other side. Jonathan Quick was consistent in that series and was brilliant in that Game 7, but for Calgary, they went up against an absolute mammoth in Jake Oettinger. In 7 games, he put up a .954 save percentage, and according to Evolving Hockey, had the best single series performance of any goaltender since 2007, with a +13 goal save above expected. So for Calgary's side of things, even though Mike Smith will likely be good in the second round, you might start to see some shots that didn't go in round 1 start to go Calgary's way in round 2. Now let's talk about that goaltending matchup for a second. Jacob Markstrom versus Mike Smith. And in terms of the top goals saved above expected in the playoffs so far, goes number 1, Jake Oettinger, 2nd, Mike Smith, and 3rd, Jacob Markstrom in terms of all NHL goaltenders in the playoffs so far. And their stats in terms of save percentage are pretty similar, with both goaltenders playing 7 games, and Markstrom having a .943 save percentage, a 1.53 goals against average, and for Mike Smith, he has a .938 save percentage with a 2.29 goals against average. So pretty close, all things considered. But in my opinion, especially with the Oilers, Mike Smith needs to be huge. Calgary was just laying the hammer on Jake Oettinger, and if Jake Oettinger was just slightly worse, that series would have been done in 6 or even 5 games. That's how good Calgary was offensively, and just how much they are peppering the nets on Dallas's side of things. So for Edmonton, that defense is going to need to be humongous. It's going to need to play its best hockey, and Mike Smith cannot flounder like he's done in playoffs past. If that happens, Edmonton might be toast, because Markstrom is going to be consistent no matter what. But personally, I still give the edge goaltending wise to the Calgary Flames, mostly because with Mike Smith, even though he might still be good in this series, at the same time, there's always that nagging concern in the back of your head that wonders if this will be the series or if this will be the game that Mike Smith starts to flounder. With Jacob Markstrom, there's much more consistency there, and it just feels like he's a much safer bet to be that elite goaltender throughout this entire series. Now, one of the most interesting parts about this Battle of Alberta is the top end scoring for both teams involved. For the Flames, for a decent chunk of that series versus Dallas, there were some concerns that the top end scoring was going to be able to be there consistently, and by the end of it, they start to really get that production back. Gaudreau, of course, with the game-winning, series-winning goal, but he ended up finishing with 8 points in 7 games played. Tkachuk with 6 points in 7 games played, Lundholm with 5 points in 7 games played, and then Backlund with 4, and everybody else with 3, 2, and 1. So even though in the end Calgary got the win, the top end scoring wasn't as elite as Edmonton's. But again, once they do go back to maybe the lesser goaltender and Mike Smith, those shots might start to go in. But Gaudreau was fantastic with that series. Lundholm was definitely a productive guy still, but Tkachuk is also a big guy that's going to have a presence on this Battle of Alberta series, off on the ice and physically and offensively. He'll be a player to watch in this series, because even though he did show up in that Game 7, there is still a lot of offensive production to go through, and I still think there's a lot of room to grow for him. As for the Edmonton Oilers, of course, the top end guy is Connor McDavid, who in 7 games had 4 goals, 10 assists, 14 points, putting the team on his back, but especially in those last couple of games, playing some of the best hockey of his entire life. And for Jacob Markstrom and that Flames defense, the fact that McDavid is playing this good is a huge warning sign. But outside of him, you also have Kane with 7 goals, 9 points in 7 games played, Draisaitl with 9 points in 7 games played, Ceci with 6 points in 7 games played, and the list goes down. Edmonton's stars were producing, and I also see that continuing in this series. But also another part of this Flames and Oilers matchup that I am really interested to see is the bottom sixes for both teams, because for Edmonton, that lack of depth has been a big problem over these past couple of years, and even though it has gotten better, especially in these years' playoffs, for Calgary, I see the depth, especially on the forward side of things, as maybe their biggest strength, especially as we head into the playoffs. Throughout that series versus Dallas, even at points, if that top 6 wasn't getting it done, the bottom 6 was still creating chances, still making life hectic for Jake Onger and that Stars defense, and also playing great defense on the other side. If they get Tyler Toffoli going, if they get Mangiapane going truly, that just creates even more depth for the Flames, and you also have that top 6 who's starting to gel and starting to get a lot more chemistry together, especially over the past couple games versus Dallas. So if Calgary is able to unlock that top 6 and even get some more luck on that bottom 6, to me the depth heavily favors the Flames, and it might be one of the biggest reasons why Calgary gets out of the series. And another interesting part of the forward group, especially for the Oilers, is Leon Draisaitl, who suffered an injury in that LA Kings series, would later play in Game 7 and still play well, but if Draisaitl plays like he's injured even just a little bit in this Calgary series, that is a huge blow, and at that point, there just might not be enough on Edmonton's side forward-wise to get past Jacob Markstrom consistently and be able to win the series in the end. If Draisaitl is out for a little bit or even plays like he's injured, that could be it for Edmonton. Now, the Flames also have their pretty big loss in Chris Tanev, who was injured in Game 6, did not play in Game 7, and we still don't have a timetable for him, which, even though I still think the Flames' defense is good without him, at the same time, defensively against that McDavid line, there might start to be some big issues, especially without Tanev there. But for Calgary's defense, they have still floated so far, and I think will continue to do so versus Edmonton. You got Stone, Anderson, Zadorov, Shillington, Hanifin, Gudbranson, and especially that bottom pairing of Zadorov and Gudbranson, I would be the first to admit that I never thought something like that would work, but it has, and it's been consistent for the Flames. For the Oilers, they have their top 6 D-men in CC, Bouchard, Barry, Kulak, Nurse, and Keefe, with Chris Russell as well factoring in a little bit in that LA Kings series. But even though Chris Tanev is gone, I still favor Calgary's defense just slightly with how well that Hanifin pairing is playing and with how solid that bottom pairing has been defensively. I think Calgary, although they won't be able to stop McDavid for too long in that series, he'll definitely rack up the points. I think they can definitely make mincemeat of that bottom 6 and even that second line and make sure that Edmonton's depth scoring isn't there. And I think for Calgary, that's the biggest thing that might happen, where the depth is the biggest difference. And again, when you go into the playoffs, when you have all 4 lines rolling, that's where I think the biggest advantage comes for Calgary. And for goodness sakes, if you compare the third lines for both Calgary and Edmonton, the Flames have the definite advantage. For Edmonton, they got Archibald, McLeod, and Puljujarvi as their third line. And for the Flames, they got Dubé, Yarncroc, and Tyler Toffoli, who were so good in all areas of the ice in that series versus Dallas. I love me some Jesse Puljujarvi, but I prefer Calgary's bottom 6. I prefer what they're going to do come the second round. I think they're going to be more prepared, they're going to be more consistent, and they're going to be faster than Edmonton's bottom 6, which I think is the biggest difference for what Calgary is going to bring. But looking at this series for Edmonton and Calgary, looking at all the small details of the defense, the goaltending, the offense, and everything underneath, there's a lot of different ways this series could go, and Connor McDavid and that Oilers offense can still be fantastic, and there's a chance that they do win this series and Mike Smith is on a top tier level. But at the same time, I see the consistency of Jacob Markstrom. I see what that defense for the Flames can provide, and I think that depth overall on the forward side of things is just much better built than what Edmonton will provide. McDavid will still probably get a ton of points, maybe 10 points in the series, but I'm not sure if it'll be enough to get Edmonton past Calgary. In the end, for my prediction, I'm going to go Flames in 6 games, and they will move on to the Western Conference Final. I think Edmonton will put up a fantastic fight, and I think that Game 6 could even go to overtime, but I see Calgary getting it done and Markstrom being the MVP of this Battle of Alberta. But that'll be it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and let me know my prediction. What do you agree and disagree with? Do you think Calgary wins this series, Edmonton wins this series, and in how many games? What are you guys thinking? Let me know in the comments down below. Share this video with your friends. Get the Battle of Alberta preview out there, and I will see you in the next one. Have a fantastic day. Drink some water, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.